Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of TideIllustrated.com. Jack Knowlton, Tony Sakalis, back again, another preview, and it's a big one. It's the third Saturday in October. Tony and I have our cigars ready, fresh from R&R Cigars. No free ads, but shout out to them. I know Tony was there recently. You can
No
get
free
your
ads. Ad.
yeah, no free ads, but a free ad. That's how we roll on this podcast. No, it is of course the cigar rivalry game, Tennessee and Alabama. Number 7 Alabama specifically, and number 11 Tennessee. You can watch the game on ABC, 2:30 p.m. kickoff. So the sun will be setting in Knoxville as Alabama is going to be trying to ride out a win, which they were unable to do. Of course, last time they were in Knoxville, which we'll get to at the end, Tony. I know you talked about that in your 5 things to watch, which we're going to go through. But just general thoughts. We've now had back-to-back games where Alabama has struggled. Of course, a loss to Vanderbilt and a narrow win over South Carolina. We did a recap pod of that, by the way, so go listen if you have not. But what have you gotten in terms of a vibe this week, Tony? For me, I listened to the Hey Coach Kalen DeBoer show last night, and the gloves really came off. This was the first one where fans really kind of grilled him. They gave him some serious questions about the turnovers. One guy straight up asked him if he was going to be more intense on the sidelines with players and coaches. So, the honeymoon period is over. I think I said that after the South Carolina game, but what's just been the vibe and the overall message that you've noticed from players and coaches this week?
I think they're just aware of how big this matchup is, and then from the older players, Alabama got its revenge last year in Bryant-Denny Stadium, but they still feel they still know what it was like to walk off that field and kneel and have those fans rushing the field and what it was like to lose up there in Rocky Top. And so I think that the revenge tour is maybe not totally done. I think they want to go kind of avenge that loss in Neyland Stadium this weekend and really quiet those Volunteers fans. And then obviously too, just this rivalry is so big. I mean, I think the general consensus is that the Auburn rivalry is obviously the number one. I think there's a small pocket of older Alabama fans that this Alabama-Tennessee rivalry is number one, but that's kind of diminishing now. It really is the Iron Bowl. But this Tennessee rivalry, on the same hand, it's heating up. I mean, it went from being 15 straight Alabama wins to now, I mean, like, it's pretty much a ranked matchup, and it's 2 playoff contenders. So, and that's, it seems like that's going to be on a yearly basis, two playoff contenders. So there's a lot of focus on this one. As far as the board and the fans are concerned, like you said, this is a real swing game. He loses this one and all of a sudden it's, 2 losses back against the wall. Probably you're getting really skeptical at that point about the college football playoff. But if he wins it and they see, that cigar in DeBoer's mouth, I don't think anyone's going to be caring that he's wearing a sweatshirt if he has a cigar in his mouth. So I think this could be one of those games where DeBoer wins back the fans. And this is his first, real rivalry game. I know you can kind of call the Georgia game a rivalry game, but no, this is like the first one where, as an Alabama coach, you're not necessarily remembered for what you do against Georgia as much as you're remembered for what you do against Tennessee and Auburn. So this is a big one for him.
Definitely. And I wrote about this too. It is truly a new kind of level because he has, of course, coached in some high stakes rivalry games. Obviously, I'm not trying to compare an Oregon Washington to a Tennessee Alabama. I know the difference between those two games itself, but he played a rivalry game for a conference championship just last year. And this game this year kind of feels like it has similar levels of stakes in terms of hopes of reaching the SEC championship. Of course, not being on thin ice for the college football playoff if you lose this game, which it feels like that's what'll happen for whoever loses. So the stakes are pretty high, and he seems like he's started to understand what this rivalry means. And yeah, he's going to get the full taste of it once he sets foot in Neyland Stadium on Saturday. So it's going to be exciting. Also very curious to see if Alabama does win, if he does try a cigar, because he didn't really give an answer to that when he was asked about it on Monday. So
I'd
lean no.
No, I have been told that he will.
Okay.
Sources say within the program that if Alabama wins, he will enjoy a victory cigar, something that Nick Saban really never did. So,
wow. Breaking news.
that in writing. I mean, like obviously at the last minute he could decide not to, but I think the general indication is if Alabama does win, and I don't know if we'll see it. I don't know anything about that, but I do believe that he will smoke us a victory cigar if they win. So
I think the idea of that image in people's minds will be enough, and obviously the win,
if
will
Alabama knows what they're doing, they're publishing a photo of DeBoer with the cigar in his mouth, lit, like as soon as they can. I mean that
most
is
definitely.
want to win the fan base over. They show that picture.
Most definitely. Yeah, I think that would do crazy numbers, as the kids say, on the old Twitter sphere. So yeah, obviously Alabama's got to win the game first, which DeBoer has made clear that's what his focus is on. And we're going to dive into some of the keys to this game that you wrote about. First and foremost, Tony, I will make you do your obligatory rereading of the injury report, or the availability report, excuse me, from the SEC. I have to get that right. Yeah, I have to get that right in my own mind. For Alabama, obviously the two wide receivers, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, have missed a couple of games each. Yanzi Pierre was a guy last week. What's the latest injury statuses from both teams heading into this one that we got on Wednesday?
So for Alabama, there's 5 people. Obviously, the 2 receivers are listed as probable, as is Damani Jackson. Yanzi Pierre is listed as questionable. The edge rusher Yanzi Pierre is listed as questionable. During the coaches teleconference, Kalen DeBoer said like questionable to probable. So that gives you a little bit more optimism, but I kind of think that maybe he's held out of this one. And then freshman linebacker Caden Jones was ruled out. We didn't even know about that injury heading into the week. But Caden Jones is somebody that's kind of appeared on special teams on both kickoff units and I think punt return units. So I would say Alabama's in pretty good injury shape. If they can get both of those receivers back, I think that will obviously help in terms of the depth there. They've been kind of surviving without Kendrick Law and Kobe Prentice. Obviously, Kendrick Law is somebody that can do so much, even without the ball in his hand. So having him back, I think, would be huge. As far as Tennessee is concerned, I mean, I think it all starts with Keenan Peely, the all SEC linebacker that they lost, leading tackler. That's going to be a big loss for Tennessee. And you talk about, this game's really close and both teams are kind of struggling. I think, you look at losing a player like that, that's a huge blow. As far as the rest of Tennessee's injury report, they've got linebacker Edwin Spillman and defensive back Jordan Thomas. They are both listed as out as well. And then running back Cameron Seldon is listed as questionable. And offensive lineman Lance Hurd is listed as probable.
There you go. So there's all the injury info you need. So yeah, I think that'll be the biggest thing from an Alabama side, is to see if Prentice and Law, it seems like they're on track to get back. If this is a game you want to have them come back for, South Carolina, you maybe holding them out as a precaution, but obviously Tennessee, you want, all your troops armed and assembled for a really, really good opponent on Saturday. And let's dive into that. Tony, you wrote about kind of 5 things to watch. We will start with who the Vols have at quarterback. We've, of course, talked about Jalen Milroe all season long. Tennessee's got an intriguing guy under center, and I do know how to say his name. It's Nico Iamaleava. So there you go, fans. If you need to know,
I was going to get it too this time.
Okay, sorry. I should have let you give it a go before.
Iamaleava. So
Iamaleava.
I said it correctly on the first try, but I also had it written
down. Yeah, the pronunciation guides. Thankfully, we're not broadcasting this game. We're just writers. That's the job of Chris Stewart, is to know that one. And I was surprised. He, on the coaches show, went out of his way to say, I'm not going to say his name until I have to, which, fair enough. He's probably going to have to say it quite a bit on Saturday. But anyway, Nico, the quarterback for Tennessee, of course, this highly touted 5-star freshman, has come in to be the starter this year. Through 6 games, he has just over 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Struggled last week in Tennessee's narrow overtime win over Florida. 16 of 26, 169 yards. He had a pick, no touchdowns. He's been sacked 10 times this season. And you kind of wrote about, Tony, what Alabama might have to do to really rattle him. And as a quarterback who struggled these last kind of couple weeks, in addition to Florida, what does Alabama have to do to kind of limit him? Because he certainly does have a lot of ability, even if he is kind of growing, coming into his own as a young quarterback.
Yeah, I think they need to pressure him. According to Pro Football Focus, he's just 7 of 20 for 97 yards and an interception on dropbacks where he's been pressured. And I think that's that's the key there, right? Is just making sure that he's you get to him, you take him out of his comfort zone and kind of force him to look at pictures that he's not used to seeing. And I think that's the key. I mean, that's easier said than done, right? But Alabama definitely has the players to do that. When you look at guys like LT Overton and Q Robinson and Jihad Campbell. So like I think it's just that's pretty much the case with anybody you play. Any quarterback, you're going to want to try to get into their head and force them into bad decisions. But I think with this one, it's especially key.
Yeah, I think you saw that a little bit with Sellers. He was able to kind of establish himself, but Diego Pavia was able to deal with a lot of pressure. He's a lot more of a veteran, so I think you're right. With Iamaleava, like he is certainly talented. I know Malachi Moore had a good quote about him, like recognizing the guy can throw the ball 70 yards down the field. He has made some great plays, had some good moments. He was a 5-star kid for a reason.
Number 2
Um,
overall player in last year's class, and he's a really good kid.
Yeah, he's certainly talented, but I think you're right. It's going to be about Alabama dialing up some pressure and getting to him. And I think actually that's a good segue into your second one of your other points that you wrote. I'm skipping around in the order, but Alabama's switched up a little bit of a couple things personnel wise in terms of dialing up that pressure. I know you talked about Jihad Campbell has started to play a different role in the linebacker room. And then you mentioned those bandits, Jamarian Latham, LT Overton. We saw them on the field together at times against South Carolina. What were some things that we saw defensively? I know the defense wasn't great against the Gamecocks, but maybe some wrinkles that we're starting to see more of that could affect Iamaleava on Saturday.
By doing some of that, you just kind of mix up the athleticism you have on the field. Obviously, by playing your 2 bandits basically as defensive tackles, you got a little bit more mobility. Jihad Campbell, Christian Robinson, the outside linebackers coach, talked about just the versatility that he kind of brings. It's kind of like having a dual threat quarterback or putting a receiver in the backfield. You don't really know how to treat him. Do you treat him as an inside linebacker or do you treat him as a true edge rusher? Is he going to drop back? You've got to kind of like think about all these things. And, the thing about Jihad Campbell is he's good enough to be a really good edge rusher. Christian Robinson, when he was at Florida, recruited him as an edge rusher. And a lot of people did recruit him as an edge rusher. And then in Alabama, he moved to that inside linebacker role. So I mean, he's done really well at both spots, and I think that's a huge thing for Alabama. One more thing about Nico,
Yeah.
Iamaleava, damn it,
Iamaleava.
Iamaleava. That's so hard to say, man. I'm in my head about it. One more thing about Nico is he can move. He is he is a athletic quarterback. I wouldn't call him a running quarterback or necessarily even really like a mobile quarterback. He's kind of like, I guess he's mobile in the way that like Bryce Young was, where he can move in the backfield. He can make plays in the pocket, but you're not going to see him tuck the ball as much. So I think, that might influence what Alabama does. They did a lot of what you were doing against Lenore Sellers was trying to create a defense that was able to kind of chase him down more. And I think, they're obviously going to have to do cover a lot of ground against Tennessee with how spread out the receivers are, but it might be a little bit different. I just think the versatility though that Alabama has in this defense is key. And just the fact that they can play 2 bandits or play Jihad Campbell at Wolf, I think that's just gives them more options and allows them to be a lot more flexible.
And I think all of that sounds good. And Kane Womack had emphasized that as well in terms of throwing more wrinkles, more defensive packages, players shifting and moving around. But overall, Tony, I mean, this defense hasn't given you much confidence that they can slow anybody down, let alone a team like Tennessee. So just generally, I mean, what do you want to see from this defense, or what has to be seen maybe from this defense to, have those kinds of things that you're talking about be effective?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to make tackles in open space, and you're going to really have to not be driven back a lot of times. The last 2 games, whether it's, Vanderbilt or South Carolina, you get people getting to the ball and then they'd be drugged 3 yards past the line of scrimmage or past the first down marker. And so I think you're just going to have players just make big time stops. And you look at Dylan Sampson, the big running back that Tennessee has, leads the SEC in touchdowns and rushing touchdowns and rushing yards. You're gonna have to stop him in open space, and that's tough to do because of how much Tennessee spreads out the ball. And people think about the passing attack just because you see all those wide receivers, and you saw what Jalen Hyatt did against Alabama 2 years ago in this offense. But really, what this offense does is it spreads you out so thin that they're able to run up the middle. And I think that's going to be key is, can Alabama, make those stops and force Nico to throw the ball, because I think that's where that's where Tennessee will get in trouble. If Tennessee's able to run the ball like a lot of teams have been against Alabama, I think that, it could be tough.
And that's another good segue, because you talked about that going kind of more general on Tennessee's spread out offense. Alabama saw a version of it a couple of weeks ago against South Florida when they faced Alex Golish, who was at Tennessee. South Florida in that game didn't pass the ball great, but you noted it, rushed for 206 rushing yards, averaged 4.5 per carry. This Tennessee rush offense, like you just said, is an upgrade of that. They have the number 7 rush offense in the country. They average almost 250 yards a game. Dylan Sampson, like you said, has nearly 700 yards. He's 15 touchdowns, which is only second in the country because Boise State has a guy by the name of Ashton G2 who might win the Heisman Trophy. This is an upgrade to what Alabama saw against South Florida. You mentioned some of the tackling. You mentioned the way Tennessee can spread players out. To me, the thing that stuck out the most was something Christian Robinson said, where, he talked about containing that running game in Sampson and also having to deal with the spread offense, as it's like defending 2 plays at once. So what else have you kind of noticed just from Tennessee's offense, I guess generally kind of just building off of the point you just made?
Yeah, it's just like I said, they spread you out. So, I mean, obviously they're able to, you got a guy with a really live arm in Nico who can just whip the ball out to those playmakers on the perimeter. So you got to respect that. But at the same time, they can be physical. It's not just a, air raid offense that can't run the ball. So you're right. It's tough. And then when you have a guy, that a quarterback that can tuck the ball and run, he doesn't as much, but when he can do it, I think that it just creates another option. So that you're really kind of have a lot to consider when you're on defense against this offense, and it's really challenging. And on top of that, they move very fast. So it's going to be a real tempo game. That's actually, yeah, I wonder if that actually maybe plays into Alabama's hands. Alabama's kind of struggled against teams that have just milked the clock. You're not going to necessarily, or you shouldn't necessarily get that with Tennessee. They like to move things fast. I wonder if maybe that's more of what Alabama likes. And then about this offense too, I think part of what Alabama struggled with was the running back, the running quarterback, whether it was, Sellers or Brown from by Byron Brown from South Florida was basically running this offense in a, just a different form, and he's more of a running quarterback. I think he caused more problems. I'm wondering, not to necessarily slight Nico, but I'm wondering if he's just better suited for what Alabama wants to stop, just because he doesn't tuck the ball as much.
Yeah, that's an interesting take too. I definitely don't necessarily disagree. Just because, the other difference to me when you look at this Tennessee rushing attack is it doesn't, like you said, come in methodical or short plays that set you up for good third downs. This team is looking to rip off explosives as quick as possible, just kind of like Alabama's offense is. So you're right, a track meet could maybe be what Alabama prefers. And then again, it like you said, it kind of comes down to that open field tackling. Can they get the stops they need to make Tennessee, as one dimensional as you can make a team like that, in order to get off the field. I'll add a little more on Sampson too. The one thing that was interesting also when I talked to Christian Robinson is, Sampson's a smaller guy. He's only 5'11", but the thing Christian Robinson talked about was Tennessee has a very experienced, for one, and a very big offensive line. And what that kind of allows, with what he was saying was Sampson can almost be patient and kind of hide behind his offensive lineman. That allows, an extra second or two to open up another hole that he can run through. They've got a guy that the 2 guys I noted, one guy's name is Andre Karic. I think I'm saying that right. He's a guard, I think redshirt senior. He's one of their best run blockers. I think he ranks second on the team from PFF and run block grade. And then their center Cooper Mays has been in college football forever. I think him and Karich have both played in that 2022 game, if I remember right. So two guys with a lot of experience that block really well. And then looking up Sampson's like tendencies, he has the most runs this season in between the left guard and the center, which I believe is where Karich and Mays play. So that kind of left side edge rusher, and obviously Alabama's defensive tackles will really have to be kind of about it to slow him down.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, like, it's not necessarily something Alabama can't stop, because I like what Alabama has up front. I mean, that, when you've got a guy that, like, I think this could be a Tim Keenan game, or maybe a Tim Smith game. Both of those guys are athletic enough to play in this spread out tackle. Maybe even Tim Smith, because he's even more athletic than Keenan. You might see a lot of him on the field just because he's more mobile, and you're going to be spread out so much, but he's going to also have to clog those lanes, make those tackles. So yeah, it could be a big Tim Smith game, just based on, the personnel that Alabama will be using. But like we said earlier too, it's also going to be LT Overton pushing inside, Jamarian Latham pushing inside. So all those guys are going to have to, come up big and make those tackles, make those stops, clog those lanes, so that Sampson has to work even harder.
Yeah, it's going to have to be a lot of like just good one-on-one tackling, because you're not going to be able to load the box. Otherwise, Tennessee can spread you out and throw the ball. And so, just like we kind of talked about. Well, one other stat I wanted to throw out in Sampson, I mentioned like the difference between, South Carolina and Vanderbilt. It was chunking you down the field, getting good, third down looks. Dylan Sampson has 18 runs this year that have gone for over 10 yards. He had a 53-yard run against Arkansas and a 23-yard touchdown against Florida. So the guy won't mess around. If he sees a hole, he's gonna, turn it, what would have been a 5-yard gain against the South Carolina or a Vandy, into a 30-yard gain. So, yeah, he's going to be, to me, that's a really, really big matchup to watch. Switching to the other side of the trenches, Tony, this is an interesting thing I think you wrote about that you've kind of picked up the last two games for Alabama on its offensive line. Specifically at right guard, you'd mentioned, kind of interesting snap counts between Jaden Roberts, of course, the starter out there at right guard, and then Gino Vandemark, who has kind of been billed as this interior, can sort of play anywhere kind of guy. And we've seen that. I'll read the stats that you wrote against Vanderbilt. Roberts had 24 snaps at right guard, Vandemark at 22. South Carolina was also pretty close in how they shared snap counts as well. 37 snaps for Roberts, 26 for Vandemark. Talk about those two and what they kind of offer, and maybe does it seem like Alabama is starting to rotate those two, and who might be better, to have maybe a higher snap count on Saturday against Tennessee?
Yeah, I think that Roberts is still the preferred option, but he's been dealing with some knocks, and so that's one of the things that offensive line coach Chris Kapilovich said, was that he's been dealing with a lot of stuff that would keep other people out, and so I think you have to make that rotation. I don't think you've seen Jaden Roberts play up to his potential this season yet. I think we thought he was going to be one of the best guards in the nation, along with Tyler Booker. He hasn't really been that. I guess you could say, fortunately for Alabama, they kind of complement each other, but you'd rather it be maybe more balanced. Jaden Roberts is a much better run blocker than Gino Vandemark. And then on the other hand, Vandemark's been a much better pass blocker against Jaden, much better pass blocker than Jaden Roberts. But on the, when you look at it, it's not like you're just going to sub Gino Vandemark in every time you're going to pass and then stuff. I mean, that'd be so obvious, and it would take forever. So you're not going to do that. So you're going to need both of them to be kind of more balanced. But I do think you're going to get the rotation. I don't necessarily think it's like a strategic rotation. Like, I don't think they're going to put Roberts in a series because they're just going to try to run the ball more that series. I think they're going to just try to keep him fresh. And then part of it is that Gino Vandemark has been playing, at a decent level. So you're able to rotate a lot more. So I think that's a good thing. It's kind of like what you were seeing between Elijah Pritchett and Wilkin Formby before Elijah Pritchett just kind of moved ahead and really won that role. So it's just about keeping people fresh and, making sure you have at this point, Jaden Roberts probably a better offensive lineman than Gino Vandermark, but maybe not when he's not at 100%. So you kind of have to keep him as close to 100% as you can to get the best effort out of him. And so it's a balancing act for sure. But I think Alabama's in a relatively okay spot with that. They'd obviously want their guys to be totally healthy and go with their strongest lineup. But I think that's part of the reason why you got Gino Vandermark is so that if you're in this situation, you could manage it.
Yeah, I think, it's good that you really emphasize the injury part of that to me, because when I read what you wrote and what I just hear you say is, you always hear this situation, like if it's a quarterback or a DB, where it's like, if you think you have two starting caliber quarterbacks, you don't have one. But I think it sounds like Alabama does have a starting caliber right guard. He's just hurt. And so you need to have this guy that can, yes, does a little bit, has a little bit of different strengths, but can still, offer you a starting caliber guy and relieve Jaden Roberts, avoid him from, getting an injury that would leave him totally out of the game. So,
And
yeah, I
Gino
think that,
Vandermark was a starter at
right.
Michigan State too, so it's not like he's just some backup that you know he's also starting level. Is he as good as what Alabama had before? Maybe not, but he's still at that level. It's not like they're taking too much of a dip with him in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll ask you this from a general offensive line perspective when you're looking at Tennessee, because I think, we should talk about this guy. If we're going to talk about Sampson, talk about Iamaleava. I'm really sad we couldn't talk about Squirrel White on this podcast yet.
Right? Yeah,
One of the best
Tennessee.
names in college football and a good receiver. I mean, that guy can make some catches against Alabama's DBs. But we should talk about this guy, and it's James Pierce Jr. I mean, how are you expecting Alabama's offensive line as a whole to hold up against? They saw really good edge rushers in Kyle Kennard, in particular against South Carolina, but James Pierce, another guy who's probably going to be a day one NFL guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they saw, also Stewart on the offensive line
Yep.
for South Carolina as well. I think they saw probably last week the best defensive edge rushing that they faced all year because I think Georgia was kind of banged up. So that was a big test against South Carolina, and they didn't necessarily do really well. And I think that comes down to Jalen Milroe didn't have his best game. You saw him he took 4 sacks, but he also just he held onto the ball too long on sometimes, but he also made some bad decisions with the ball. And really, that's something that we hadn't seen out of Jalen. That was something that we thought, he had kind of progressed from. And not to say that he hasn't progressed from it, but he did, at least even if it was just one game, he did regress from what we had seen. So you want to see how he's going to handle pretty much an equally good Tennessee pass rush. I mean, the Volunteers can really get after the ball. James Pierce Jr. is going to be an NFL player. I've seen him mocked in the late teens or 20s, and I don't know, man. He could easily, I think, shoot up into that top 10 range. He is so good. And I think he forced the fumble last game against Alabama. So he's definitely somebody to watch. And I really think it's going to come down to Jalen Milroe making good decisions with the ball. Maybe that's throwing it away. Maybe that's tucking and running faster, and escape, because Jalen can escape a lot of pressure too. But he's going to have to be a lot better than he was against South Carolina because Tennessee will make him pay for it. And then on the flip side, if they're able to bother Alabama, and Jalen Milroe with the pass rush, I think Tennessee's offense is going to be able to make Alabama pay a lot more than South Carolina's offense was.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to be a guy I'm sure circled. I know they only like to refer to their team's best players by their number. I've started to do that when asking questions, either do the number or just say the position and they know who I'm talking about. But, we all know who Alabama's talking about if they're referring to James Pierce. That dude is a stud. So, he'll just be fun to watch too, to see what kind of he does against a decent offensive line. So yeah, that will certainly be an important matchup for sure. Your last point, Tony, before we roll into predictions, and I thought you wrote about it well, because you talked obviously about this being a revenge game. You mentioned it at the top, and some of these guys, that have talked about it, players like Malachi Moore, who've been here, who experienced that 2022 game, getting off the field, when there's a crowd of angry, or not angry, happy Tennessee fans rushing the field, tearing down the goalposts. But I want to go to a quote that you put in here from Ryan Williams, who, of course, knows about the game, but was not obviously on the team. Said, "We were in the locker room just talking about it. They don't want that feeling again. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure they don't have that feeling." I'm not trying to turn this into a Ryan Williams segment, but I think that was a good quote that you put in terms of emphasizing this is, still a revenge game, even though they beat Tennessee last year. Everyone on the team, whether you were a part of that or not, kind of feels that. So just talk about that a little bit. Obviously, you covered that game as well.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I think a lot of the veterans are letting players like Ryan Williams know how much it stunk walking off the field, and having to see, the the fans rush the field, and being a part of that experience, and not getting to smoke the victory guard cigar for their first time, and like that, all that kind of sticks with you, and it's almost like a warning to the younger fans, is like, hey, don't take this for granted. Like this, you're going to remember this game, win or lose, and especially if you lose, you're definitely going to remember it. So you don't want to go through that feeling. And I think on the flip side, people like Ryan Williams, some of the younger players, they want to have their teammates back and help them get that revenge. And so that's good to hear from Ryan. And I think Ryan, another example of Ryan Williams just acting like a veteran and not a freshman. I don't think you really have to tell him the gravity of this game, but it's nice to see that he appreciates it, and he's looking to kind of have his older teammates' backs. And for like a guy like Malachi Moore, or a Tim Smith, I mean, like, you came back partially for games like this, to play in this game one more time. So I think, to send them off, I mean, it's going to be a sour note on Malachi Moore's career if he has to say that he lost to Tennessee twice, including his last game. And so he's not going to want that. And I think that there's going to be a lot of, inspired play due to that.
That's what I was going to follow up with, was just what you've heard from some of those veterans in terms of how hungry they are to win this game. Because you hear from DeBoer all the time, the most important game's the next game, but even he's placed a little bit of an emphasis on this one. But these guys, care far more about this game than they did, the South Carolina game, as much as, they won't want to say that. But yeah, like you said, this game matters to them from a legacy, standpoint, which is what we all watch football, play football for.
Yeah, I mean, and you saw Malachi Moore talking about like how that's what you want, is to have these situations. You talked to Tim Smith about expecting a little bit more trash talk. That's one of the things he talked about was expect to hear a little bit more in games like this, because it's a little chippier. And so it's like, I think it kind of gets the juices flowing, and I think that the veterans are kind of amped to play. I don't think they want to let on too much, and they definitely don't. There's been a huge emphasis, whether it be the players or whether it be the coaching staff, not to add bulletin board material this week. And you almost kind of thought Tim Smith was going to do that with his trash talk remark, but he kind of said that was like more about everyone and not just Tennessee doing trash talk. So yeah, I just think that the focus is there. Players are amped for this one. Maybe they weren't as amped for South Carolina. I mean, I don't think anybody in Alabama is going to admit that, but hard to imagine they were as pumped up for 11 o'clock game against the South Carolina team as they will be for this 2:30 matchup in Neyland, third Saturday in October. You got those nice fall colors, the crimson and the orange, and I love this game. I mean, I really do. It's a fun game.
It is a fun game. I'm looking, I wasn't on the beat yet for that 2022 one. I wasn't here for 2023. So yeah, I'm looking forward to experiencing it. Listening to I guess not listening to Rocky Top, this isn't a Tennessee podcast, but yeah, it sticks in your head, at least the first couple plays, but that is neither here nor there. I'm just stalling now because it's prediction time, and man, we've been off on our predictions for Alabama's last two games for the opposite reasons that we might be off in this game, because obviously Alabama's last two games went the way no one probably expected them to. You did have the better score. I went 35-10 Alabama. You went 34-10, so you won by a point. So you've now had the better score the last two games. Not that I'm sure that really feels any special to you, because frankly, the scores weren't very close. But we're on to Tennessee. Do you have a score prediction and a player to watch, or are you going to force me to give my prediction first?
I guess I should go score first, right? Because I kind of cheated last game, and
oh, sure, yeah, we can flip this time.
I guess, yeah, it would just be kind of unfair for me to make you do it again, right?
I do have one written down already, so I'm going with what I write down regardless of what you say. I'm going to put that out there now.
I don't have one written down, but I still think it's unfair for me to do it. I will go. Whew, I think it's going to be a defensive battle. But I don't necessarily think it's going to be like. I think it's going to be more defense. Like I'm looking at the over under and it's 56, and I'm like,
Yep.
I don't see it reaching 56.5. So 56 or 57. I see it being a little bit lower than that. I'm gonna go 27-20 Alabama. And
Okay.
I told myself that I was actually like, if you followed my predictions throughout the whole offseason, I said that, Alabama was gonna lose this game. I said that, like I kind of had maybe two losses. I wasn't sure about the Georgia one, but I had Alabama. I think in my season predictions, I actually had them beating Georgia and then losing this one as the only game that they lost all season. But I just kind of see the way that the season's been playing, and it's like I almost don't think Alabama's going to have three bad games in a row. Although Tennessee, you don't really project them to have three bad games in a row. I don't know. I don't. There's something about this game. It's just kind of changed my mindset, and I'm going to go Alabama 27-20.
Okay. Do you have a player?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Malachi Moore. I think for the reasons that we said, with this just being such an emotional game for Alabama's veterans. He's an Alabama kid. He grew up with this rivalry. He's from Birmingham. This is he grew up pretty much just never seeing Alabama lose. And so having to be a part of that loss, I think he's going to want to make redemption for that. And so I think, he had it was the COVID year, right? But he had a interception return against Tennessee. I think he makes another big play. I don't know if it's for a touchdown. Alabama still hasn't gotten that non-offensive touchdown. Maybe he provides the first one again. And that's a great way to close out his, kind of third Saturday in October career. But one way or another, whether it's a sack, whether it's a turnover, I think Malachi Moore comes up big.
I think you have the much better take on this game than I do. Because despite not being in attendance in 2022, I just have visions of that game dancing in my head and what a thriller it was. I kind of agree. I think these offenses have shown you nothing to suggest that an over in this game is going to hit. I think these defenses are good, and probably Alabama's has left a lot on the table. I guess it's probably a stretch to call Alabama's defense good at this point, but they've left a lot on the table and could maybe have a good game. But you know what? I'm not going to go with that. That's not the score I wrote down. I'm gonna flip this. I'm gonna go an absolute shootout game. And in the spirit of 2022, here's my narrative, Tony. My score prediction is 38-35 Alabama. There's a whole bunch of touchdowns scored. And then the man of the hour, instead of a wobbler kick from a Tennessee field goal kicker, my player of the game is going to be Graham Nicholson hitting a walk-off field goal and kneeling.
Field goals, Jack. I wasn't going to say, I was trying to come up with ways to make mine 27 without having any field goals.
This is what I thought, right? I considered that because it'll be 35-35. There will be no field goals kicked until that last one. And Graham Nicholson, walk-off field goal, Alabama smoking cigars on the way out of Neyland. That's my narrative I'm building for this game, and I'm sticking to it. I don't think it's going to happen. Like I said, I don't think it's going to happen. I think you're spot on. I think these two teams have both been bad the last 2 weeks. And I think it's probably going to be kind of a clunker, and whoever sort of figures it out by the end will win. But for some reason, I just am kind of like, it's going to turn around for both of them. It'll be a great game. And that's how I'm predicting it to end. So you know what? If I'm wrong, I won't be shocked. If I'm right, then we'll all have watched a great game on Saturday. So that's the way I've decided to look at it.
Yeah, like I said, I was trying to think of a way that I could do 27-20 without having a field goal, maybe like two safeties or a missed extra point or something like that.
Surely it can't keep happening, right? He's got to have to kick some eventually. I mean, my goodness,
We'll have to see. Yeah,
this is not what the Lou Groza Award kicker transferred here for. He hasn't had to do anything, but you always hear kickers say that they like it that way. The less they see the field, the better the team's probably doing. So,
Sure.
Who knows? But I'll go with that. We'll have a little bit of fun, but I'm just excited to watch this game, and we shall see how it goes. That'll do it for the preview, but of course, can't step away without doing our 5 other games for the week of picks. To revisit last week, Tony, week 7, I ended up winning that week 3-2. We did Texas, Oklahoma. I had Texas. You had Oklahoma covering the 14.5-point spread. The Sooners let pretty much all of America down for that being a good game because it was not. We both picked Ole Miss to go into Death Valley and win or cover 3.5-point spread, and they did not. LSU won a big one. That's going to be a huge game when Alabama plays there in a couple of weeks. Ohio State, Oregon, game of the year candidate in that one. My Ducks came up big. They were quacking by the end of it.
Yeah.
You did have Ohio State. You did get the last two games right, though. Penn State, they were 4-point favorites. USC did cover that spread. You had the Trojans covering, and they did indeed. And then Kansas State did beat Colorado, but they were 4.5-point favorites. We both picked the Buffaloes. We both explained we wanted the Deion narrative to kind of continue. Colorado did lose, but they lost by 3, so we both got a point.
Wow, we're pretty terrible.
Yeah, it was a rough week for us. Oregon, Ohio State. How about that game? Also, I don't know if you watched that, but that feels like it deserves a quick bonus.
12-man Dan Lanning genius move. I like the 12-man on the field move.
I am a Dan Lanning. I know he was DeBoer's coaching rival last year, but I love Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning is awesome. He's such a.
He should come to I don't know, it'd be funny if he I don't know, replaced Hugh Freeze at Auburn. I mean, that would never happen, but it'd be cool, he had
somehow ended up at Florida or
there you go, maybe Florida. I mean, he's not leaving Oregon, no, but definitely, but
yeah. If he wasn't leaving Oregon for Bama, I don't think he's doing it for Florida. Anyway, on to week 8 this week, and we have 5 games for you. I will start. I do have 3 SEC ones. We'll start with those. I might do the last SEC one last because it's the biggest game of the week. We'll start with probably the most boring on this one. We're going to go to Columbia, Missouri. Auburn as 4.5-point underdogs against Mizzou. I want to do this one because, of course, Alabama plays Mizzou here next week after Tennessee.
And they're playing your Tigers. Don't
of course,
alma mater. Yeah,
I won't snub the alma mater, but yes, they are playing the Missouri Tigers. Do you like Mizzou 4.5-point favorites? It is homecoming for Missouri, if that changes your opinion on any of that.
You know what I just realized is that didn't Georgia schedule Auburn for homecoming, and then now Missouri's scheduling them for homecoming?
I think so.
That's a rough scene for an Auburn team. That I mean, history would prove would be one of the SEC powers. And didn't Missouri? I don't let you talk about Missouri, but didn't y'all invent homecoming or something like that?
They did. Yeah. Missouri's big bragging thing is they did technically. They coined homecoming.
I'll let you get that out of the way because I know that's probably troubling in your brain. I'm actually gonna pick. I'm gonna pick the Tigers. No, I'm gonna pick Missouri. I kind of think that there's a good chance Auburn does pull off at least one upset. I don't think they're just gonna totally fall apart. And I do think Missouri's overrated, but I don't know. I think that game being at home for Missouri, it's gonna be tough, and I have them winning. And I guess I'll take them over. They got 4.5. I'll still take Missouri. Even with Auburn getting 4.5 points, I'll hang with the home team here.
I'm going to go with Auburn. I think if Missouri wins this game, it's going to be probably by 3. There's a chance that their passing attack can come alive. Auburn's secondary is really bad, but Missouri played an A&M team with a good pass rush last week and looked awful. Auburn, the one thing they can't hang their hat on is their pass rush. That their front 7 is actually pretty good. And so I think if they get some problems for Mizzou, I think I still like Mizzou to win, but you know what? That spread's a little too big for me. I think Mizzou might kind of win it by 3, or a little bit less. So you know what? I'm gonna go with the visiting Tigers. Pick against the alma mater for this week. No one call me.
Tigers will win.
The Tigers will win.
But they will also.
Yes, the Tigers will win, but also lose. Great analysis. Next one. Let's go over to the Big Ten. We'll do this game first. I told you I was going to get a game of this team on this eventually, and I'm going to do it this week. We have 5-1 Nebraska going on the road to Bloomington, Indiana, to play an undefeated 16-ranked Hoosiers team that are 6.5-point favorites against Dylan Raiola. Can you believe this? Indiana, the darlings of the Big Ten, the former home of Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, Kane Womack, I think maybe Brian Ellis too, if I remember right. So this has all sorts of past Alabama ties, but Indiana is making the Big Ten proud right now. Like I said, who do you got? 6.5-point favorites against Raiola and company.
I feel this way, like you know how we picked Colorado because we just wanted it to happen. I want
Yes.
this to happen for Indiana. That's why I'm going to learn from past mistakes and say that Nebraska's actually going to come in and win this game. So, like, I want Indiana, but you know, I could just I could even see Nebraska coming in and upsetting Indiana. Sometimes you know the lights get a little too bright for you. Especially with 6.5 points. You said Raiola, you know, with Nebraska, I think
Mahomes.
Yeah, you got the Mahomes Jr.
Yep.
Or at least the Mahomes impersonator. Give me Nebraska, especially with an extra 6.5 points.
I'm going to go with Indiana. I love this Hoosier story. I watched something about Indiana football, and they're all time, they have never been good ever. It was literally the Michael Penix 2020 year when DeBoer was on that staff. That's really the only year they've ever done anything. So I love it. I like them being a dark horse. I do like Dylan Raiola. He's a good quarterback. Nebraska could very easily win this game. And this is another one where actually the spread kind of feels too big for me. I think Indiana could again win by 3 or 4. But I gotta rock with them. They're Indiana. I'm all in on the Hoosiers this year. Let's stay out of conference. We'll do the last 2 SEC games last. We'll go to the ACC next. Miami, 6th ranked Miami, 4.5-point favorites on the road against Louisville. This is a pretty good Louisville team at 4-2. They struggled against SMU and Notre Dame, bounced back with a win last week. Do you like them to maybe pull the upset or at least cover against the Hurricanes?
I'm taking Miami and ACC refs against Louisville. I think I just feel like Miami. I'm not saying that there's anything necessarily, but I think Miami's destined to win the ACC. And if it's close, like we saw against was it Virginia Tech with those close calls, I kind of think that maybe they get away with it. Plus, you got Cam Ward. I think when you just go for the better quarterback in a matchup that's kind of close. So, what do they got points wise? As you said, 4.5. I'm still taking Miami. So give me the Canes on the road.
I'm going to also take Miami. And the only other thing I wanted to say about Miami, they might have the easiest schedule of a top 15 team in the country. They've so far played Florida, Florida A&M, Ball State, South Florida, Virginia Tech, and Cal, 2 teams that the refs gave them those games. Like you said, the remaining schedule at Louisville, home against Florida State, home against Duke, at Georgia Tech, home against Wake Forest, at Syracuse. If you're keeping track, they do not play any other undefeated ACC team currently. No games against SMU, Pitt, or Clemson to close out the season. Those are really the only other teams in the ACC doing anything. So
watch Georgia Tech just totally ruins the ACC by eventually beating Miami. After just getting Florida State off to that bad start, they just come back and win.
Georgia Tech is and Syracuse on the road are quiet sleepers. Georgia Tech's 5-2, I think.
Here, yeah. They're probably going to lose this week against Notre Dame, but yeah, they have been a weird team.
Yeah, and then Syracuse is 5-1, 2-1 in conference. They have Kyle McCord from Ohio State, so look out for those as trap games. But I looked at that schedule and I was like, if Miami doesn't cakewalk to the ACC championship, I mean, goodness gracious, this is an easy schedule even by ACC standards.
So there's
definitely. All right, back to the SEC. We'll finish things off. You know the game we're going to do last, but we'll do this one. But first, number 8 LSU, 2.5-point favorites on the road at Arkansas. This game has been kind of fun in years past, so I wanted to throw it on here because this is an LSU team that now is really on the up and up after a huge win against Ole Miss. And, this game feels a little trappy on the road in Fayetteville against an Arkansas team that's been better than I think people thought. Who do you like?
It feels trappy, but then on the flip side, they're only getting if this was an Arkansas 5.5 plus 5.5, I think then you're starting to think oh, okay, that's the easy trap pick. But you've got the number 8 team in the nation going up against an Arkansas team that a lot of people didn't think was going to be anything. And I know that they beat Tennessee on the road. But
Well, they're at home.
Yeah, I know, but they beat Tennessee on the road, right? Or were they at home?
No, Tennessee was at home. They were at home for that game. Arkansas was.
Oh, my bad. Well, anyways, like they beat Tennessee, and so but I don't know, man. I think this is an easy LSU take right here.
Okay.
They're just not Arkansas is not getting enough points, and like LSU is playing so well. I kind of see that LSU Alabama matchup being my new. If Alabama's going to lose the second game, that might be my new like game I'm circling to maybe watch out for. But yeah, they're playing really well, and if I continue the streak of taking the best quarterback, Nussmeier is definitely the pick. So yeah, I guess I'll just go with Garrett Nussmeier and LSU in this one.
I think you've convinced me. The spread just kind of feels too close to be the like Arkansas being able to cover. I'm looking at the history of this game. 2023 LSU won by 3. 2022 LSU won by 3. 2021 Arkansas won by 3. 2020 LSU won by 3.
So
and then 2019 that streak breaks. That's this game's been sneaky, but guess what?
Golden Boot. This is one of my favorite like trophies in
Yes, this is a fun one. So all those games have ended by 3, but guess what? The spread's 2.5. That's less than 3. Give me LSU. Last one. You can talk about this for as long as you'd like. The game that's taken the prime time slot for on everyone's TV screens this evening. Number 5 Georgia attempting to march into Austin, Texas, and dethrone the number 1 Longhorns. Texas is 6-0. This feels like a game. If they win, it truly does become Texas and then everybody else in the rankings. The Longhorns are 5-point favorites at the time of recording at home. Who do you got?
Look, I was ready to say Georgia, and then like just after like seeing Oklahoma just get dismantled, even with a 14-point spread, I feel like as a Texas native, I have to go with the Longhorns. I can't doubt them anymore. Like they certainly look like the best team in the nation. I know Georgia's Georgia, but I don't necessarily think this is a typical Georgia. It's not as dominant as some of the recent Georgia teams. I'm not saying they won't make the playoffs, so they can't beat Texas or anything like that. But I don't think this is the same Georgia team, and I think this Texas team is the best team in the nation. We'll definitely find out. If Texas can do what it's been doing to Georgia, they're going to be unanimous number 1 team. But yeah, I'm going to go with Texas.
I don't disagree with you, but I'm going to pick Georgia to be different, to cover. I don't disagree with you. I think Texas does win this game. I think they are better than Georgia. I think you're right with what you said about Georgia not being quite the Georgia that we've known. This Texas team is really good, and I do think they win. I think they win, and they still kind of solidify, all right, it's Texas, and, maybe if you give them a good enough game, maybe if there's a team better than Georgia, can give them a game. I guess that's what I have to lean on because I'm going to pick Georgia to cover. Kind of going to do it just to play devil's advocate. I'm not confident in that pick at all. Texas could win this game by 2 touchdowns.
SEC kind of wants Georgia to win this, right? I mean, I know Alabama does, but like,
yeah, for the sake of parity, yeah,
like Texas not coming into the conference and just winning it. I mean, I think like you almost want to like make them earn their stripes in the SEC. Them just to come in. Right now, you look at it and you have Oregon coming in and probably being on track to win the Big Ten, and Texas coming in being on track to win the SEC. It's you start
alignment.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, right? So
totally.
I don't know. Maybe Georgia shows that like, hey, you got to earn it in the SEC. Maybe they come back and remind people that they're Georgia. I don't have it in me to pick against Texas this many times, especially when they're doing so well. So I got to go with my home state.
No, you're probably going to be right. I'm just going to try and play devil's advocate. Georgia's, if they are still the Georgia of old, they will show up and win this game. That's, I think, the thing I can hang my hat on, I guess. This is also, potentially just looking ahead. Texas A&M plays Mississippi State, South Carolina, New Mexico State, Auburn, and LSU. If they can get through that LSU game, that game against Texas on the last day of the regular season, because Texas is at Vanderbilt. No easy feat to win at Vanderbilt. I'm just going to, that could get a primetime game. Texas is at Vanderbilt, home against Florida, at Arkansas, home against Kentucky. Man, that A&M Texas game, those are the top 2 teams in the SEC right now. I mean, you're looking at potentially a game for the SEC, championship.
There's a chance, right, that they play each other twice, 2 times in a row.
It could be. Yeah, it could be if they both stay undefeated.
It would be so like A&M to like just the hard luck Aggies to like somehow lose to Texas like twice in a row and like
miss the
playoff just by or somehow like still get there because the Aggies haven't lost the SEC game. So maybe it's like somehow still get to the SEC championship game. Maybe they lose to LSU, but then like somehow still get there and then beat Texas and then lose to Texas in the championship game. And like, do they get in with 3 losses?
Right.
I mean, actually, at that point, I feel like they probably do. That they get in with 3 losses if one of your losses.
They'd only have 2. They'd only have 2 because if they lost to LSU,
LSU, and then lost to Texas in the championship game after.
Oh, right, because they have the loss earlier in the year. Yeah. I forgot.
So I'm saying like I think at that point though, like if we're just really getting into the weeds here, at that point, if you had number 1 team and then had to play them right again and then lost, I feel like people would probably let the Aggies in at what would it be? It'd be 10-3 at that point. I think they'd let them in. I don't think they'd punish.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't think
it's an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah,
we're not there yet. We're not there. We can't do all these deep dives until we do it.
But yeah, so
it's interesting. All right, there you go. There's our pick'ems for this week. There's our show for this week. If you're making the trip up to Knoxville, Tennessee, enjoy it. Figure out your cigar situation in advance. Should Alabama win, and if they lose, I don't know, throw them away. Or I was gonna say give them to a Tennessee fan.
Anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
To hell with it and smoke them.
Cigars taste good, win or lose. I guess they taste a lot sweeter when you win, though. We shall see how that game goes. We'll recap it. We'll have all sorts of coverage. So stay locked into Tide Illustrated. Subscribe there. Subscribe here on YouTube. We will see you next time.